Good morning. It's for me a great pleasure and a great honor to speak to the students of the Tokyo Metropolitan University, which is a great university in a great city in a great country. You have to be proud to be part of this university and to learn here with a great academic group of professors and within the framework of a great governorate under the leadership of the head of a governorate who is dealing and doing an outstanding job in leading the Tokyo region for the future in this moment, which is difficult because of pandemics, but also in this moment, which is very challenging with the prospect of the Olympic Games, which I hope will take place at last in this wonderful environment of Tokyo. I miss Tokyo quite a lot, and I would be eager to come very soon to give another lecture live with you around me and me with you to discuss during the lecture and after the lecture and have a cup of tea or coffee to discuss, as I like to do with students. Let's speak about where we go, what is the future. Let me remember that you are students, you are young in your 20s, and you will have my age in 2070 or something. Can you imagine that? 2070 means that in 2070 you will be, I hope, still on the planet. You will have important jobs, activities, you will have family, you have children, you will have grandchildren, and your children would live up to 2130 or 40 or more, and your grandchildren, which will be born something like in 2060, may be there in 2150. Therefore, you can think that what I'm going to say, that you may repeat to your children, that could be repeated to your grandchildren, could be heard by people living in 2150, which is quite a lot. And therefore, it is important to give lessons on what can happen, what should happen, and where the world is going. And not to only stay on small issues of tomorrow, today, tomorrow, what is coming in the next week. Of course, it is very important to understand what is coming in the next week, because the next week means that we have to survive in the next week, and that we have to do everything to be in position to survive and to do the best choices in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of food, in terms of gym, in terms of family relations, in terms of love in the next week. And mainly when you are young, the decisions you take in the next weeks are much more important than the decision to take in the next week when you are older, because it's at the moment of your age, between the 20 and the 30s, that you take the most important decision. You are at the crossroads of different lives. Of course, it is important also to remember, and I will come back to that, that you always will be at a crossroad, because you have to be prepared not to have one life in one channel without any possibility of changing, but the world is going to change very rapidly in the decades to come. And then rest assured that whatever you learn now, you will have to be retrained very often in the future. And whatever you choose as a job now will not be your job in 15 years or 20 years. You will have to change. It will adjust due to technologies, due to challenging environments and changing cultures and many, many other things that will happen in the world. We know that because we see already some very important challenges that are around us and that we have to face. We have to face the pandemics. We have to face the climate change, which are the most obvious changes the most obvious changes of a day, and the most obvious changes that have to be addressed now. In terms of the pandemics, we all know that this pandemic is there for a while. It's not going to be over ever, if I may say that it will be over and disappear. No, it will never disappear. We have now to live with the fact that we will have COVID of that kind in the coming years. And fortunately, mankind was strong enough to invent very rapidly some vaccines, and maybe one day some drugs. These vaccines was based on fundamental research made in France 40 years ago, 50 years ago even, and that was developed later on by Germans, some French in America, some Greek in Germany or in America, and some people of other countries, including Japan, which means that this is another example of the fact that now we are not only global in terms of pandemics, pandemics has no border, but we are also without borders in terms of solutions to the crisis. And the fact that now we are going to have to address these pandemics globally, because it's clear that some people say that the pandemic is over because we have a vaccine. It's not true. The pandemic is still growing around the world. The number of cases, 800,000 a day, it is growing every day globally in the world, even if it's declining in the US, declining in Europe, or stabilized in Europe, and maybe beginning to stabilize elsewhere. And in some countries, the figures are dubious. We don't know the real figures in China, as well as in many other countries. When the pandemic is not over, and it will only be over when the world will have been able to vaccinate not only the rich countries, which are far from being vaccinated, but the whole of the world, which means that we need to produce not 1 billion, not 2 billion, but 10 billion vaccines in the next 12 months if we want to eradicate the pandemics as it is, knowing that the pandemics may also rebound even in the vaccinated countries if some variants escape, which is unfortunately quite possible, to the protection of the existing vaccine. It's why there will be, whatever happens, needs for other vaccines wherever we are, even in the countries where people are already vaccinated, in order to get safe from the potential vaccine variants. And that means that we have to live with the fact that we will have to be vaccinated once or twice a year for that, as we are vaccinated for the flu or for other kind of diseases very often around the world. That's a new fact. We have to be vaccinated. And that's an element of what we need to remember. This crisis has also is then still very present, and we have to focus mainly globally on vaccinating the whole of the world. There are some programs that have been proposed to do that, but they are far from being implemented. There is not enough resources that have been found for that, and these resources must be looked for and found for in the coming days and weeks or months if we really want to achieve this goal, vaccinated the whole of the planet in the course of 2021, which is a huge challenge, but absolutely fundamental if we really want to get rid of it. That is also an element of demonstration of some many dimensions of the future. One is the fact that the COVID demonstrates that a lot of issues are global, not local. You cannot find a solution local. And even if you try, like China, to isolate yourself and to find a solution alone, you should not forget that you have been, is China, at the roots of a global worldwide crisis, and that you cannot create borders totally closed, and that if the pandemic is still going around, you will be targeted again. Therefore, there is no local solution to a pandemic. Second lessons that has to be learned is that if we were prepared sooner to it, it would not have happened. We have seen that through the example of South Korea, which was very well prepared because they failed in dealing with a previous crisis in 2009, and then they get prepared quite in advance to this existing crisis, and they were very well prepared, and then they managed as soon as December 2019 to put in place the proper infrastructure for test, mask, and distancing people, which were efficient, and they have now quite a very small number of victims, around 2,000 deaths, compared to a population of 53 million people, which is also the case for other countries such as Taiwan, New Zealand, and even Japan, which has been very well managed during this period because of the example and the tradition of Japan to be aware of the risks of different kind of flus and air pollution. Then the two lessons that are here are the lessons of global issues are global, and the fact that prediction is fundamental. Prediction is fundamental. Two other lessons are coming. One is the fact that not only the disease is global, but that the solution is also global. You cannot escape alone, as I said before, and that means that we have an interest in the fact that the others are vaccinated, which means that we have an interest in the fact that the others are well in good health and well prepared for everything. That's a very important point. And the second lesson is that the fourth lesson, I said global, I said long-term forecast, I said an interest in well-behaving of the others. And the fourth lesson is that it's important not only to forecast, but to take lessons or the consequences of forecast, which is to create prevention. Preventions mean take actions ahead of a danger, not to repair the danger, but to prevent it. It's exactly what we are doing with the vaccine, and the vaccine is a prevention against the problem. And all these four lessons are fundamental for a lot of other issues, as we are going to see. First, it is obvious that it is important for the other issue, which is already obvious and visible here, which is the climate change. We know that the climate change is a global issue, and that the emission of CO2 is a worldwide danger that no one can think to escape alone. For instance, my country, France, is, thanks to a wise use of nuclear energy, one of the lowest emitting countries in the world, with much less than 1% of the world emission, with a GDP of almost 4% of the world GDP. But France alone cannot, even if France is making a lot of efforts, that doesn't change the global emission of CO2. It has to be a world challenge. And then this lesson is also implemented to it. The second lesson, when I say we have an interest in, the second lesson is that we have an interest in the well-being of the others. It's also true with the CO2. We have an interest in the fact that the others are taking care of the vaccine, of climate change, and then we have an interest in the fact that the others are reducing their level of production of CO2, and also the fact that prevention is fundamental, and that we need to take care of the others, to take care in terms of prevention, as well as we have to forecast climate change. We forecast climate change. We know the climate change is global, but we have not yet embarked into the two actions which should be embarked. It's a global action against climate change, and is the fact that we should add against the climate change before the climate change began by transforming radically the nature of production of the world in order to fight against climate change. If we take those four lessons into account, I repeat, global, the fact that we should think long term, the fact that we have an interest in the well-being of the others, and the fact that we should act before the catastrophe is here to prevent before acting. If we look at that globally, that gives us some good lessons to what we could do and what we should do for the well-being of the others. That's fundamental for the action of the future. Let's look at the future post-pandemic situation compared to on different dimensions of our future. I'm going to speak of the dimension of economics, the dimension of mastering of time, the dimension of politics, the dimension of education, the dimension of ideology, and the dimension of geopolitics. And I will think about it for you, especially student of the Tokyo Metropolitan University and Japan, in order for you and your country to do more and better. And of course, I will be delighted later on in other circumstances to go further and to help you do more. The first element is the fact that we should think of the world as a total change after this pandemic, because we have realized that this pandemic is a fundamental transformation of the world. And that we should have realized through these pandemics that we do not invest enough in some fundamental sectors that are badly needed and that have appeared to be badly needed. Of course, we have not invested enough in health, not enough invested in digital, not enough invested in hygiene, which has been the cause of what happens in the Wuhan wholesale markets, but also in many other sectors that appears to be fundamental today. And we have invested too much in some sectors which are very dangerous, some the sectors which are linked to fossil fuels for CO2. And therefore, I would say that we have now to focus on what I call economy of life, which means that we have to focus on some sectors which have been not enough developed, and that should be the core of growth of the future. Not only the growth of the economy, but the core for you students of your studies, that you should learn more on these sectors than the others that I will mention also. What are the sectors of economy of life? Health, hospitals, drugs, but also medical devices, prevention, hygiene, education, culture, democracy, media, research, digital, renewable energy, improvement of the energy efficiency of housing, security, defense and security, insurance, finance, non-speculative finance, some other sectors such as logistics, trade, which is also fundamental for the distribution of products, culture, which is fundamental for life and democracy, and some small sectors related to all that I mentioned. The sectors which are not in the economy of life are the sectors which are linked to economy of death. What is linked to economy of death? It's all the sectors which are related to something that kills. What kills? Fossil fuels. And therefore, all sectors related to fossil fuels are not part of economy of life, which is also already, of course, the production of fossil fuel, oil and gas, everything which is related to that, which is car industry, airplane industry, as long as they are produced with fossil fuels, but of course not electric cars or electric planes. Mechanics linked to automobiles and planes, aeronautic airplanes, as long as they use this kind of energy, but also textiles and fashion, as long as they are done with plastics, and plastic is fossil fuels. Therefore, plastics and everything which is packaging, everything which is textiles in plastics, which is unfortunately a vast majority of textiles today, should be banned, not tomorrow, but as soon as possible, in order to get rid of this poison, which is fossil fuels and its use. But there are also some other poisons which should be out. I said that food and agriculture is needed, but not anything. There are bad food which are poison, and we should ban everything which is linked to sugar, as well as we should ban everything which is linked to drugs and tobacco. That gives a clear vision of what we should ban, which are not in economy of life. Some sectors are in gray zone. Fashion, we should of course wear some clothes, but they should be done in a sustainable manner without using the work of children to produce either cotton or other kind of textile, and not using plastic textile. We should also keep some element of tourism, which should be banned if we only look at their travel dimension, but we should also look at tourism through another angle, which is hospitality. And hospitality is fundamental to develop a region, to develop proper agriculture. And hospitality should be used on other dimensions. We need hospitality in hospitals, in healthcare. We need hospitality in plants, in headquarters of companies. We need hospitality in all dimensions of life. We need hospitality in public services. And then the techniques of hospitality, which is developed by the tourism industry, should be used in other sectors but pure tourism. And therefore, studying for being part of the tourist industry is good as long as you use the hospitality technology and techniques for that. In the sectors of economy of life, we have also all the other sectors of tomorrow. I say digital and deep digital, artificial intelligence, new kind of computers which will use neural systems, but also other technology of tomorrow, which has been quite well developed in the past in Japan, such as nanotechnologies, biomimetism, which is a fascinating field for tomorrow, which is part of the economy of life, which is the fact that you look at nature and you see in nature there's a lot of things that nature does perfectly well, and you try to take lessons out of it to imitate it, either to reproduce nature, such as develop forest as much as needed, because we need dramatically to develop forest in order to swallow CO2 and to get rid of it. And the plantation of sustainable forest is a key element of the future. And we need also to understand nature, to imitate nature, to do as well as they do for flying objects, which are efficient and use less energy, for also using a huge amount of amazing cleverness of nature to develop colors, to develop new kind of textiles. There are huge amount of potential development linked to biomimetism, which is understanding nature and imitate it without destroying it. And I can go on and on other technology that will be fundamental in the future, which are not linked to poisons such as oil, sugar, tobacco, and other kind of drugs. We give a very fundamental reorientation of the economy, of training also, and of many dimensions that should be needed and that could be organized. This is something we should do we are going to do, and this is something that I suppose Metropolitan Tokyo University will develop as priorities for teaching. You should learn more of these jobs than the other one. Of course, it will not be tomorrow because there are cars, and Japan is one of the best producers in the world of cars. But Japan is also trying to do its best to move electric cars. Japan is also using a lot of fossil fuel and non-renewable energy, such as gas. Not enough some renewable energy, such as, unfortunately, nuclear, which is a renewable energy, which could be used as a transition to real renewable energy, and of course solar and wind, and maybe one day also, when the technology will be ready, hydrogen, clean hydrogen, not hydrogen using gas to be produced, which is a fake hydrogen, will be very good to produce energy. All that will be good. And if we look at what is today, if you take the sectors of economy of life, they represent only half of the GDP of each country, which is far from big enough. And in the course of your life, I would dream to see that the economy of life sectors will represent more than 60, 70, even 75% of the GDP, and that the other sectors using poisons, sugar, oil, and tobacco could be either totally forbidden. Some countries are beginning to forbid the use of tobacco. Some countries are planning to get rid of tobacco production and tobacco use totally in the next 5 years, and it will happen worldwide. Tobacco companies can do something else with a huge amount of money they have. And it's the same with oil company, gas company, and other company that can do something else in the future. That's what I think could be done and should be done, and it will give a great direction of the future of economy based on the 4 elements that I mentioned before. Be global, think long term, think of the interest of the rest of the world, and think of prevention as first. That's why I mentioned the sector of insurance as a key element of economy of life. I said that I will mention 6 dimensions of the future. This is the first one, the economy. The second dimension is the time management. We have learned a lot through the pandemics. We have learned first that people have forgotten that they are going to die, and that they need to have a better understanding of the quality of life they want to have. We have to have a better understanding of the fact that life is short, that it should be intense, and that we should do our best to improve it. That's why within the framework of economy of life, we should develop health, but we should also develop other organization of time. And the fact that for a while, many people have worked at distance have changed a lot. We use Zoom, we use other techniques of distancing, but it will not be enough. You young guys, you need to meet more than the others. We all need to meet because we know that meetings are fundamental, that serendipity is fundamental, that we need to exchange something which is unprepared. And if you want to meet someone that you don't know, it's fundamental that you have real meetings. You are not going to meet your love by Zoom. You have to meet by chance, by meetings, by real encounters. And then we need to have a better management of time. Sometimes we'll be using this kind of technology. Sometimes you will be using real life. Let's take, for instance, the example of companies. Companies will use more of this technology at distance. But what we have seen during this crisis has demonstrated that even if this technology is very good for many dimensions, it's very bad because the meetings are too long. There are too many meetings, too many people in the meetings, and therefore there should be some rules. And some companies now, which are very advanced, such as some Japanese company or some international company in Japan, such as I was told Microsoft in Japan, have decided that not only they would try to have no more than 5 people or 6 people in a meeting, Zoom meeting, in order not to have it too long, 1 hour maximum meeting. And when you fix a limit to a meeting, like a limit in a course, therefore you do a better job because you know it's limited, keep 10 minutes at the end to conclude. They also try other ways of behaving, which is to do the same length of work, whatever is the length, which will be 40 hours, 35 hours, 35, 36 hours, 42, whatever is the rule in a given country. But to do that not in 6 days, not even in 5 days, but in 4 days. And there are some examples that demonstrate, it's not general, but some examples that demonstrate if you work hard in 4 days, then you can keep 3 days free, not to do nothing, but to train, to learn, to take care of your family, and to deal with learning something else, music, literature. And it's fundamental not to be one-track minded by your job, not one-track minded by your activities, but that you have other way of thinking to the world, to be open-minded and to look to a lot of things. And why management of time is so fundamental. You should have a very clear understanding of the fact that even if you are young, your life is going to be short, even if it's 110 years old, which I wish you, it's very short, and then you have to manage it efficiently. You have to look at your agenda. You have to be sure that you do the best of your time. Even if you choose to do nothing, to be idle is a very efficient use of your time if you use it in the purpose of restoring your mind, thinking aloud, etc., etc. Therefore, taking care of the time is fundamental. Taking care of the time means also, as I said before, being aware that it's long-term, that you have to understand what is coming later, and that you have to understand what is the fundamental risks of the future. Long-term is here. That means also that long-term means that we have to think of what happened next. We have to think of what happened after us. And thinking long-term means to think also of demography. There is a very famous American humorist called Groucho Marx who said, "Why should I care of next generations? They have done nothing for me." This is funny, but it is not true. And Japan is a very good example of that. If you think that you don't need next generation, therefore you don't have children. You are selfish, you don't care, and you don't have children. And if you don't think long-term, that's fine. I don't have children. I live myself. I don't spend money for education, for their living, and I just live for myself. But it is a stupid behavior, because suppose that in Japan tomorrow, there is no new baby. And people are happy because they are selfish, and then they decided that there is no more baby, which is, as you know, almost already the case in Japan, where they have very, very few babies. But you have no babies, what happened? No need for hospitals to give birth to babies, no need to kindergartens, no need to school, no need to gymnasium, no need to universities. And then we'll begin to have a lack of electricians, plumbers, doctors. And then you living today without children, we will begin by suffering very hard, because there will be nobody to take care of you, to care about you when you have a health problem, because there will be no new doctors. And then the last living people will die, because there will be no one else, with no one to support them. The end of mankind will be a disaster, because we have to understand that that's part of, very important part of managing of time. We have to understand that we have a strong interest in the existing of next generations. We have a strong interest in the well-being of next generations. We have a strong interest in taking care of long-term. We have a strong interest in understanding long-term. And then whatever you do, you will have always to think about the long-term of yourself and the long-term of the rest of the world. I advise you to do on a regular basis a short text, which is what is going to be my life in the next 6 months, what is going to be my life in the next 2 years, what is going to be my life in the next 10 years. If you do that, even if you change, if you look at it later, you will realize that trying to put in writing what is going to be my life in the next 10 years will give you a lot of ideas about what really to do with your life in the next 10 years. It's exactly like a car at night. You are a car at night going on a road, but you don't have lights. Of course, you go to a catastrophe. If you open the lights, then you have a chance to avoid the catastrophe and to stay on the road. Then you are not sure, but you have a better chance to stay on the road. And that's why it's so fundamental to try to understand the long terms, to try to think about you in 10 years. Think about who you are going to be in 2030. Where are you going to be in 2030? Think about it, and think about it seriously. If you think about it seriously, and if you write the story of your next 10 years, each 6 months, you will see that it will change a lot your way of understanding what you have to do. That's my point. And if we have done that, and that's one of the consequences of the pandemics that make us understand the value of time, the value of quality of time, and the fact that we must cherish the time we have on this planet and do the best of it. The first consequence is on politics. There are many consequences of politics. The fact that we should understand that we have an interest in helping the others in our country and abroad. The fact that we have an interest in developing the economy of life sectors compared to the others, and that this is a program for investing, for priorities for government and budget, for priorities for different activities. Economy of life should be the priorities of government. But in politics, there is also another consequence that should be done, which is what I mentioned before, prevention. Not only we should do prevention by developing vaccines, as I said, but also by doing everything which is to avoid the problems. We should do everything, for instance, to get rid of sugar in the education, in the food, in order to prevent diabetes and obesity. We should get rid of everything which is linked to many dimensions that destroy the quality of life. For instance, we should do a lot to push students to make sports, and people all along their life, even if they are 80s, to make sport, because sport is fundamental for life. If you don't do sport, you will die young and on a regular basis all along your life. And then a lot of things should be pushed by politics on prevention. This is also true for companies that should do a lot to prevent accidents at work, to improve the quality of life of the workers in order to avoid and reduce the rate of suicides, which is very bad, and to improve the fact that people understand that they have an interest in the well-being of the others, not only the next generation, but also their neighbor. I said economics, I said time, I said politics, I would say education. Education is fundamental to understand the future. If you want to build a good future, of course, you have to give education. Not only education for young like you, but education along the life. Because as I said, whatever you learn now will be obsolete in 10 years. And then think that you will be students all along your life. You will have to keep 1 day or half a day a week to study again all along your life to be up to date to the new technologies, the new techniques, the new culture, the new dimension that will be needed. There will be no routine anymore, even in the supposed stable jobs of administration or whatever. You will have to change all the time. You will have to learn, and you have to be curious. You have to get the grit, the motivation. What the most important quality in education is grit, motivation, the will to be curious. And that is also something which is linked to the nature of education. Of course, if you have, like in Japan, an education who put the priority of excellence, then you may have a great link to excellence, but it's not enough. Because as I said before, if it's only selfish, it's suicidal. And one of the great mistakes and weakness of many educational systems, including Japan, not only Japan, it's also true in other countries like France, that the educational system is too much oriented toward individual excellence and not enough in terms of cooperation. Not enough in terms of think about what you can learn by exchanging not only with your teachers, but with your colleagues in the same class. You can learn a lot by exchanging with your colleagues in the same class. You can learn a lot by exchanging with the others in the same class. You can learn a lot in exchanging with the people which are different races, different social classes, different genders. And it's also one of the most important element of education, which is to give an equal education to girls and boys, to give to the girls the same possibility to do the same jobs, in order to get also a capacity to get a revenue and to have children. It's fundamental. No nation can be really affluent if half of the population, which is the women, have not the same rights and the same potential to get best studies. Of course, studies must be mainly made in the sectors I just mentioned, which is the sectors of the economy of life. We need more engineers. We need more people coming from doctors, and all the sectors I mentioned, and less people working in fashion, cars, tobacco, oil, and non-renewable energy. That gives quite an organization of the future of education. Be open, be cooperative, understand what you can learn with the others, have an education which is not ranking, but learning, that you have to learn, and if the others learn more than you, that's fine, because if you exchange with them, you can learn with them more than what you have lost. And don't think about being the first thing to the group being better. Think like you were a member of a soccer team. If you are a member of a soccer team, if you are good, that's useless if the other 10 players are not good also. And then you have to think also, if you are in an orchestra, if you are good, but the other musicians are bad, the orchestra as a whole is bad. And therefore, it's very important to think of the orchestra as a whole and to think you as a group, the nations, the family, the school. And you will see that even alone, you learn more if you think about teaching. Myself, I have always thought and realized that the best way for me to learn is to teach. When I teach, I explain ideas like I do with you, and then new ideas come to me. And then when I exchange to my students, which is unfortunately not the case today, I learn a lot from the questions of my students, from the objections that they said, from the idea, the critics that they made to me. And then if you want to learn something, don't hesitate to raise questions to your fellow students. I say, don't let anything without saying, I don't understand, I go on. No, never let something in your lessons without understanding. And if you want really to understand, if you have not understood, go to a friend next to you in the same class and say, I'm sorry, I did not understand. Did you understand? And then he will answer, because if himself, she does not understand something, she or he will come to you and you will also answer. That is the best way to improve. It's an education of cooperation and not an education of competition, which is true also globally. And that's the fifth dimension. I said economy, I said time, I said politics, I said education. I want to speak about ideology. All what I said is that we are now at the crossroads between two kinds of ideology. The first ideology is the ideology we are in now, which is the ideology of individualism, selfishness, competition, market economy, greed, where each one trying to be the best and to kill the others. And we have seen that's not good. We need to be altruistic by vaccinating the others. It's fundamental for us. We need to be altruistic by helping the others to reduce the number of CO2 that we produce. That's good for us. We need to be altruistic in producing children, next generation, because we need the next generation. It's good for us to have children. It's good for us to have grandchildren. It's good for me that you exist, and it's good for me that I have grandchildren. It's what I call selfish altruism. Then it's an opposition between altruism and selfish altruism. Selfish altruism means that I realize that I have an interest in being altruistic. It's true for many things. If you sell bread, you have an interest in the fact that your client is happy, that you have an interest in the fact of being altruistic to your client. It's true everywhere, but it's also larger than that. As I said, you have an interest in the fact that the poor are not poor, that the ill people are not ill anymore, that the ignorant people are not ignorant. Don't think that you can build something on your power against the weakness of the others. Not true. You have an interest in everyone being strong and diverse. It's what I call the ideology of altruism, cooperation. And this ideology of networking, working together, could be an ideology of excellence, because you can have excellence against the rest of the challenges. We don't need to be good against the friends. We need to be good against ignorance, against poverty, against climate challenge. We have enough challenges to be good without willing to be good against the other fellow human beings. It's better to be good against the challenges of mankind than to be good against the potential competitors in our narrow life, than think that we have enough challenges to be able to think of the world as a whole where altruism is a key. If you could think of that you have a selfish interest in being altruistic, you'll be very happy. And one day, maybe later on, you will realize that not only it's your rational interest to be selfish, but it is also an amazing pleasure to be altruistic. Not only a selfish interest to be altruistic, but a real pleasure. One day you may realize that it's even wonderful to be altruistic without waiting anything in return, but you just are happy to make people smile without hoping to have something in return, but you'll be happy to love someone without even waiting for him to love you. That you are happy to assist someone without waiting for anything. The best gift you can give is a gift you give without being known. The best help you can give to someone is to give help anonymously. The best charity you can do is to do a charity without being known that you do a charity, without expecting anything in return. That's the second dimension of altruism, not rational or selfish altruism, but real deep altruism. And when you are there, you will realize that it's wonderful to be useful. You will even realize that it is a privilege to be useful. Don't forget that sentence. It is a privilege to be useful. It is a privilege to be useful. Because if you are useful, that means that you are in position to be useful. And that means that you have reached the point where you are good enough in something where you can help the others. And that's a real privilege. last of the 6 points I want to mention is what are the consequences of all that on geopolitics? Is there a consequence on geopolitics? Strangely enough, not a lot. The world is today a fight between many powers. Mainly, people say that there is a fight between US and China, but China is growing, and China is going to be the strongest power of the 21st century. The pandemic is not changing anything. US is very strong, China is growing, Europe is still the wealthiest part of the world, Japan is still a superpower, and the pandemic has not changed a lot of that. Of course, China make believe that it went out of a crisis better than the others. It's not true. China has lied, and the pandemic is mainly caused by the past behavior of China. China is still very strong in terms of weapons and military control of the region, and it's certainly a very strong military superpower. But in terms of level of standard of living, the GDP per capita in China is 1/5 of GDP per capita in the US, and it will take more than half a century to reach the same level of the US, even if they ever reach it. But it's true that China is a strong superpower. Will it be a strong military superpower? Will it be a strong superpower in the future? That's not for sure, because when they try a very strange system of totalitarian market economy. And on the long run, market economy requests freedom. You need freedom for market, you need freedom for research, for innovation. And then, will it be tomorrow or in 10 or 15 or 50 years, China will face the dilemma. Should I give to my people freedom, or should I keep the control of the party against the freedom, and therefore I will kill market economy? The market economy needs freedom, market economy needs rule of law. Middle class will need rule of law and freedom. We'll see. But China is entering in a very difficult time. Will it last 10, 15 years? I don't know, but it's not a sustainable system on the long run. And more than that, we may say that if China was really to dominate the world, that means what? China is actually trying to become Western. If you look at Chinese people, they dress like Westerners, they listen to Western music, they imitate our music, and they don't try to impose to the rest of the world the Chinese culture. Even if the Chinese food is amazingly good, even if the Chinese culture has a huge amount of treasures of literature, music, and everything, they trying to be the best in class in the Western world. But it's true that the world is in the danger. There are dangers of wars today. Dangers of war for Taiwan, dangers of wars for Ukraine, dangers of wars in the Middle East, and all these dangers are today pending. We should be very cautious about it, because all these short-term dangers could put on hold all the long-term issues I mentioned. I do hope that humanity would think of the importance of multilateral negotiations and to be wise enough to avoid the wars and to think to the exciting long-term issues that I just mentioned. I wish you the best, and I hope to see you very soon in Tokyo. Thank you very much. Finished.